Tonight, Lunar New Year horror. Authorities search for a motive in the wake of a gunman's rampage.
We're looking at all criminal history, mental health history.
Plus, the FBI's 13-hour search of President Biden's Delaware home yields another batch of classified material.
It's unbelievable how this could happen. It's totally irresponsible.
Democrats now in support of an investigation. And former President Trump and evangelical voters.
Do not take them for granted.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The White House flag flying at half-staff tonight, marking another deadly shooting in America. Good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. 11 people are dead, at least 10 others in critical condition in the horrific Lunar New Year massacre at an Asian dance hall in California. Authorities still searching for a motive after the mass shooting in the Los Angeles suburb of Monterey Park. The CBN's Brody Carter joins us with tonight's top story as police and the LA community try to make sense of the now dead gunman's actions. Brody?
Jenna, that shooting happening in a majority Asian American community. Monterey Park, known as the country's first suburban Chinatown. People there were ringing in the Lunar New Year when this tragedy unfolded, quickly sparking fear over a targeted attack against Asians.
You have 10 unresponsive inside, and you have 2 that are still in critical condition of breathing.
This is 72-year-old Hucan Tran. The man police say entered the Star Ballroom dance studio Saturday night and opened fire.
We're looking at all criminal history, mental health history, and those are all things the detectives will take a very hard, long look at.
Sheriff Luna said the initial victims, 5 men and 5 women, all appeared to be over 50 years old. One of the victims included this survivor's dance partner.
And I realized all my hands are blood. I thought I got shot too, you understand? After that, I realized he already at the back, bleeding.
After killing 11 and injuring others, police say Tran drove 20 minutes north to another ballroom in Alhambra. Only this time, Tran is disarmed at the door by 26-year-old Brandon Say.
When he started prepping the weapon and something came over me, I realized I needed to get the weapon away from him, disarm him, or else everybody would have died.
And he was disarmed by 2 community members who I consider to be heroes because they saved lives. This could have been much worse.
After Tran fled the scene in this stolen white van, police tracked him to a shopping center parking lot about 30 miles from the deadly shooting. After a 2-hour standoff, Tran shot himself before he could be arrested.
A SWAT team approached and cleared the van and determined the suspect sustained a self-inflicted gunshot wound and was pronounced dead at the scene.
Investigators searched the suspect's home looking for any motive that led to this mass shooting. And while the suspect is dead, the investigation continues. Jenna?
All right, Brody Carter, thank you very much. And here with us now is Raymond Chang, president and co-founder of the Asian American Christian Collaborative. Raymond, thanks for coming on the show tonight. So since the pandemic, attacks against the Asian community have been going way up. Why is that?
Yeah, I thank you so much, Jenna, for having us and having me on the show and for covering this this tragic event. I mean, it's affecting not just Asian Americans, but especially Asian Americans all throughout the country, especially as we're facing so much violence. That's unpredictable. Yeah, I think all throughout the pandemic, the linkage between COVID-19 and the pandemic has led to, and China has led to a rise in anti-Asian hate and violence that has long been a part of America's narrative. We were considered yellow peril. There were propaganda efforts calling for the Chinese to go, or that the Chinese must go and leave this country, and that leads many, including among the Asian American Christian community, to feel like no matter how many generations we're here in the U.S., we're never viewed as American enough, or we're never viewed as a part of the fabric of society enough. And so the rhetoric around the China virus, the Kung flu, the China flu really started showing up in pulpits and pews, which is when AACC, or the Asian American Christian Collaborative, started to chime in. And we really wanted to make sure that if violence was being perpetrated, it would not be by Christians, which unfortunately was not the case, especially as we saw with the Atlanta shooting. But I think a lot of the reason we've seen the violence, especially in the midst of the pandemic, is because of a lack of discipleship that addresses the broader social and systemic issues that impact us and shape our racial imaginations.
Yeah, talk to us about ministering to the community in wake of a tragedy like this.
Yeah, it's extremely hard because everyone is already taxed and burdened from the last several years. I mean, regardless of your background and your race, everyone's just tired from all the impact of the pandemic. And so going through the pandemic and still having had no time to recover has been challenging. The other element that makes this extremely challenging is that we don't really have clear understandings of how to think through and theologize around violence of all sorts, especially around gun violence. We still are divided, very much so, across the country, including among Christians, and we are not able to have meaningful discourse and discussion. But in terms of those who are on the ground ministering to different communities, I think the number one thing that people are looking for is an acknowledgement around the pain that is still so unprocessed and the trauma that has piled up over the years, and the creation of a space that people can take to be able to heal from all the collective hurt, trauma, and loss that our communities have gone through. But everyone is tired. People don't know how to make sense of everything, and they're trying to make meaning of things and find hope and light in the midst of all the exhaustion and all the hurt and pain.
Yeah. Raymond Chang with the Asian American Christian Collaborative. We have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Thank you.
And in other news tonight, the White House facing more questions about classified documents after another discovery over the weekend at President Biden's Delaware home. This is the 5th time this has happened since November. Once at a former Biden office in D.C., the others at his home. This latest discovery comes after a 13-hour voluntary FBI search of President Biden's Wilmington house. Now, Democrats are joining Republicans in support of the special counsel's investigation into the president's handling of classified data.
It's unbelievable how this could happen. It's totally irresponsible. And who's at fault?
It's not supposed to happen. Whether it was the fault of a staffer or an attorney, it makes no difference. The elected official bears ultimate responsibility.
So that's why there needs to be this independent investigation, an independent prosecutor. How many documents are we talking about? Dozens, a handful, or hundreds?
As the White House scrambles to deal with this ongoing scandal, President Biden's chief of staff is likely leaving his post. Ron Klain expected to step down in the coming weeks. Jeff Zients, who served as the White House COVID response coordinator, will reportedly replace him. Disloyal or disenchanted? As some Christians turn away from former President Trump, a look at how he could shore up evangelical support in 2024. Next. Welcome back. As former President Trump embarks on his 2024 presidential campaign, a key voting bloc that backed him in past elections may not be showing as much enthusiasm this time around. Evangelical endorsements of the former president have yet to start ringing in. David Brody has this look at the trouble Trump could have at winning over Christians.
For President of the United States.
While it's clear Donald Trump is all in for 2024, his MAGA hold on evangelicals may have lost some strength. A lot has happened since last time around. January 6th, the fallout with Mike Pence, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents, continued focus on the past election, and just overall drama. Corey Lewandowski is his former campaign manager.
How much work does Donald Trump have to do with evangelicals? He's got the track record. I got it. I got the resume, most pro-life president in history. No one's going to argue with any of that. But this is a different time.
Oh, David, he has real work to do. Let's not kid ourselves. I'm sure that the team has a plan, but the work with the evangelicals and others that he may have taken for granted in 2020 is very real.
As it stands, some of the prominent faithful who fervently backed Trump the last time are still in the pews, not yet willing to commit. No official support from the likes of Franklin Graham, Jack Graham, or Albert Mohler, all previous backers. Pastor Robert Jeffress, once a vocal Trump defender, says he'll wait until the primary season comes into focus. Dr. Mike Evans, who helped mobilize evangelicals for Trump, says the former president does not personify biblical values and, quote, does not have the support of the evangelicals that he did. Christian TV host James Robison has also been critical this time around, saying, quote, if Mr. Trump can't stop his little petty issues, how does he expect people to stop major issues?
Some of these people love the Trump policies, but they don't like the chaos that sometimes ensues around him. And I think they are waiting to see, is Ron DeSantis going to get in? Is Mike Pompeo going to get in? What is Mike Pence going to do? Are we going to see people like Chris Sununu or Kristi Noem get into the race for president as well? I think the field is still being developed.
Meanwhile, liberal media outlets like Vanity Fair are taking advantage with headlines like, "We will get destroyed. Evangelicals are quietly ditching Donald Trump's 2024 bid." The overall message being that evangelicals will consider options like Ron DeSantis, Pence, and others if they get in. So what does Donald Trump think of all this? Well, it's something we discussed during a phone interview earlier last week.
What is your message to them?
Well, I don't really care. Look, that's a sign of disloyalty. There's great disloyalty in the world of politics, and that's a sign of disloyalty because nobody has ever done more for right to life than Donald Trump.
A public sign of trouble came after a social media post by Trump regarding the midterm election results. He wrote, quote, "It was the abortion issue, poorly handled by many Republicans, especially those that firmly insisted on no exceptions, even in the case of rape, incest, or life of the mother, that lost large numbers of voters." Leaders of pro-life organizations like the Susan B. Anthony list didn't like those comments, saying, quote, "The approach to winning on abortion in federal races proven for a decade is this: state clearly the ambitious consensus pro-life position and contrast that with the extreme view of Democrat opponents. We will look forward to hearing that position fully articulated by Mr. Trump and all presidential candidates."
I want people to do what they have to do and, keep their beliefs. But I think without exception, Ronald Reagan and myself and others, many others, probably most others, believed in the exception because, if you don't have it, I think it's very, very hard, frankly, to get elected.
Despite that misstep, Trump is still considered the most pro-life president in American history. And evangelicals won't forget other accomplishments, like 3 Supreme Court justices, religious freedom victories, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and many others. Some 2024 faith support is already building. The group, Pastors for Trump, led by Oklahoma pastor Jackson Lawmeyer, has chapters in each state.
When President Trump made his announcement that he was going to run and seek the nomination for the president of the United States on the Republican side, there was a lot of pastors and faith leaders that were very silent. I just began thinking, hey, we need to rally pastors behind President Trump because we recognize that in our lifetime, there's not been a more pro-Christian president than Donald Trump.
Even though that may be the case, there is still a lot of work to do.
We have not seen the type of outreach from his team that would historically have been conducted by now in a presidential campaign. So my advice is do not take them for granted. They need to be cared and fed and talked to and listened to. And don't rely on what you did as the president, because these people want to see continuation of those policies without some of the chaos that surrounds the campaign.
And in the midst of any type of chaos, what's needed most is prayer. It was fervent last time around for Trump, and no matter whether evangelicals vote for him this time, prayer for the upcoming election is definitely in order. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, David. And joining us now, Julia Manchester, national politics reporter with The Hill. Julia, good to see you. So you've been working on some of your own reporting on former President Trump and evangelicals. What's your take? Does Donald Trump have an evangelical problem, and how big of an issue could that be?
Yeah, Jenna, I don't think it's necessarily an evangelical problem, but what we're seeing is evangelicals are sort of stepping back, and very much, I should say evangelical leaders, that is, are stepping back and watching what happens in this primary, because we know that unlike 2020, when President Trump was really the only nominee on the Republican side and was running for re-election, they didn't have a choice besides President Trump, and they were happy with what happened and such, and there weren't any challengers. However, now we're seeing more potential people getting in, like Ron DeSantis, like Mike Pompeo, like Mike Pence for himself, who is an evangelical. So I think they're waiting to see how this really pans out and how President Trump's campaign pans out. A lot of the evangelicals I spoke to said, look, this is nothing against President Trump. They are just looking to see how this primary shapes out. They very much said that they were thankful for what he has done and very much still support him from a policy sense. But there are other candidates that are jumping in.
Another weekend, another slew of classified material found at President Biden's home. Julia, could this end up being the death knell for Biden's 2024 plans?
I don't know if we know it's going to be the death knell yet. I mean, we have to see how this plays out, how the special counsel investigation plays out as well. However, this isn't a positive for Biden in any way. This very much shows that the White House seemingly caught flat-footed in handling this. It seems that the White House has been not as forthcoming with the public in saying essentially what happened, what they knew when, despite the fact that reporters have been peppering them with questions about this, the series of events. That being said, though, the White House would say that they handled it better than, let's say, the Trump team, in that they automatically called the National Archives and were cooperating with the Justice Department. They also point to the fact that there appeared to be more documents found at Mar-a-Lago, and President Trump's team wasn't as cooperative. But it's really a headache, I think, right now, after, what should have been a celebratory midterms for President Biden with Democrats overperforming. It seems now that his approval rating isn't so great, and he's dealing with these negative headlines.
Senator Joe Manchin is calling out the president over the weekend for his mishandling of these documents. In an interview this weekend, Julia, Manchin pointedly did not rule out the possibility of a 2024 presidential run for himself. What did you make of that?
That's really interesting to hear, because over the past couple of weeks, we've seen the Senate Republican campaign arm really targeting Joe Manchin in particular, along with two other red state Democrats, Sherrod Brown in Ohio and John Tester in Montana. So Joe Manchin is in a very, precarious spot going forward right now. I mean, he, might have his own political ambitions, but at the same time, he is facing an incredibly tough re-election bid. And right now, he doesn't have necessarily a wide blanket of support from Republicans or Democrats. So he's very much trying to walk a fine line. And I think the scandal or the controversy with the documents that were discovered at President Biden's home in Delaware sort of allows him to be critical of the White House, as we're seeing some other Democrats start to voice concerns about it, while at the same time getting hammered by Republicans in a campaign sense. We'll have to see what he does, though. He's in a difficult position.
All right, we will see. Julie Manchester with The Hill. Thank you so much, Julia. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
And coming up, has the Federal Reserve missed the mark? With recession fears rising, why some say the Fed is to blame. Recession is imminent. That's the consensus among a majority of U.S. economists. Though the Federal Reserve's fight to lower inflation has led to a slight drop, prices are still expected to keep climbing, leading to some to say that the Fed missed the mark, overcorrecting the country right into a recession. Caitlin Burke explains.
One key factor in all of this is the money supply. In 2020, fear over a pandemic shutdown prompted the Federal Reserve to begin pumping more than $6 trillion into the U.S. economy to combat unemployment and promote economic growth. Congress injected close to another $6 trillion in stimulus-related spending. The result? An overstimulated economy.
The reason we have such high inflation now is that the money supply was growing so fast in 2020 and 2021. That's still in the system. That's still driving things.
Steve Henke served on President Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors and is now a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University. He says the Federal Reserve got this one wrong.
They're overdoing things, you see. They created this huge growth in the money supply in 2020 and 2021. That, with a lag of 12 to 24 months, gave us a lot of inflation. That's still in the system. And now they hit the panic button early last year and they're overdoing it. They're squeezing the money supply too rapidly, and it's actually contracting in an unprecedented way.
As the Fed rapidly raises interest rates, many businesses are hurting, and much less money is going into the economy. Henke says it's now just a matter of watching the recession play out.
The money supply starts changing, in this case, actually going negative on us. With a lag of about 1 to 9 months, asset prices react. They go down. That's why the stock market's been kind of stagnant. Nothing going on in the stock market. Then, with a lag of about 6 to 18 months, the economy reacts. Real economic activity starts changing. And that's the recession. That is a recession.
Henke anticipates recession to begin around the end of this year and predicts inflation will continue throughout it. In the meantime, he's largely ignoring economic headlines like job reports, the dollar status, stock market, and unemployment numbers, and simply watching the money supply.
Money dominates. That's the signal. The rest of the data are important. They're not irrelevant, but they can be, and they usually are noise because people really can't package them into any meaningful model that leads to an accurate prediction.
While Henke can't predict the length of a recession, he believes it will be significantly worse if the Fed keeps raising interest rates. He recommends a pivot that would allow smaller economic growth rather than continuing to seek contraction. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Finally tonight, this marks 3 weeks since NFL safety Damar Hamlin's collapse on the football field. And last night, a bittersweet homecoming for the Buffalo Bills star. Hamlin cheering on his team from a stadium suite as they faced the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC Divisional Round playoffs. The stadium erupting in cheers when he appeared on the big screen.
What a beautiful, triumphant story that galvanized this entire nation and well beyond the football universe.
And the Bengals beat the Bills handily 27-10. For Hamlin, many credit his recovery to the nationwide prayers that poured out on his behalf. Have a great night.